Hello, everyone. This is a program provided by our Indianapolis Public Library, and we want to say thank you to the Meridian Foundation and the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation for their support of this nonprofit workshop series. Be sure to check out the library website to make sure that you take advantage of all of the free workshops that are being offered, thanks to the generous sponsors. This is actually part 2 of understanding nonprofit boards. The first part was on the board of directors. What's the job of the board of directors? This one is about recruiting, engaging, and retaining board members. That's a big factor for any nonprofit, whether you're a new nonprofit or a veteran nonprofit. Everyone always wants to know where to find board members, how to keep them engaged, and how to keep them on the board. So here are some questions that we should consider. What does it mean to build and sustain a strong board of directors? What is a strong board of directors? Second, where do you find new board members? How do you recruit them? And how do you keep them engaged in the work and wanting to continue to stay with your nonprofit? Well, a strong board of directors has a lot of characteristics in common. First of all, a strong board of directors has strong attendance. Directors make attending board meetings a priority. Second, they make personal contributions to the organization. Think about that for a minute. If the board of directors doesn't contribute to an organization, why would anyone else? So the board of directors are strong contributors to the organization. They also make connections with other organizations. They also are well-informed and participate in meetings. They ask great questions, and they avoid groupthink. So that gives us the basic characteristics of what a strong board is. So now, how do you keep that board strong? Let's talk about where to find new board members. Your volunteers are often a great source of new board members. When you've got a core of volunteers, it's pretty easy to see who's really dedicated, who does great work, who's completely reliable, and is also passionate about the organization. Many boards I know recruit from their volunteer ranks. Neighborhood leaders. If you're located in a neighborhood, you probably know the neighborhood organizations. Take a look at them and see if not only the exec or the president of that organization, but maybe another member of that neighborhood group might be interested in serving on your board, because certainly they have a stake in how well the neighborhood does and in the work that your nonprofit is doing in the neighborhood. Current board members can also be a good source of board members. But I will say there's one caveat about that. Be careful about always recruiting from the same group of family and friends. The most frequent complaint I hear from a nonprofit is that they are a well-kept secret. If you always recruit from the same group of people, you don't expand your influence, and other people don't have an opportunity to get to know you. So start looking in other places where you may get board members. The other thing too about always recruiting from the same group of family and friends is that it does promote real consistency of thought. And it's good to get some differences of opinion and some different ideas involved in your board. Leadership programs are also a great source of volunteers. Most counties have a leadership program in which they educate members of the community. People will join a class, and they will, for almost a year, have various opportunities to get to know the community. And they are also always trained in how to be good board members. And that's a great source for you, because you can get some people who are ready, willing, and eager to serve on a board. In Marion County and the surrounding counties around Marion all have leadership programs, including Marion County. And United Way of Central Indiana has a specific leadership program called Leadership United, where they train people to be board members. So it might be great to make a link there too. And then volunteer centers at your local United Way, at colleges, neighborhood organizations, where you find volunteers may also be a great place to find board members. Keep your eyes and your ears open and look for people that you meet. Your executive director may also refer people to you that she's met in the community who might be good board members. I also encourage boards to have an application to be a board member. Now, you may be small enough that if you find someone who wants to serve on your board, you're all set to put that person on the board right away. Having someone fill out an application makes it a bit more important. It becomes more of an honor to be on that board. It's like a job application. And it also gives you an opportunity to have a lot of information about that person on paper before you start to elect them to the board. Diversity. We've certainly heard a lot about this lately. We've been hearing a lot about diversity for a long time. And the most important thing about this is that boards should represent the community that the nonprofit serves. That should be your overriding goal in terms of diversity. And I've listed just some of the elements of diversity. There are lots of elements of diversity. There's also diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. Socioeconomic status can be an important one. I know boards that have included former clients or clients on their board because they want that perspective from the community. And there are lots of opportunities to diversify in terms of geography. If you happen to be in a county that may be rural, you may want to see if you can get people from all parts of the county as well. So in terms of diversity, there are a lot of different kinds of concerns that you may have. I really encourage boards to have a discussion about diversity. I think it's a great topic for the agenda of a board meeting. Talk about what diversity really means to your organization. What does it mean? Do you have members on your board that represent different segments of the community? That are you age diverse? Do you have people from different races or ethnicity on your board? What are the occupations of your board members? It's a great thing to record all the characteristics of your board members and then look at what you may be lacking, what you need to look for in the community. Recruiting new board members. Give them lots of information. I always want to tell people my favorite story concerns my very own husband. My husband was invited to lunch by a friend of his. And I said, you know, your friend Bob was just elected the president of XYZ board. And I bet he's going to talk to you about serving on the board. My husband said, oh, I think we're just going to catch up. And I said, would you like some questions to ask? And so I gave my husband a list of questions. And I said, if he asks you to serve on the board, there's some things you should ask about. Well, sure enough, he went to lunch with his friend Bob and they had a nice lunch together. And as time was winding down, Bob said, I have been elected president of the XYZ board. And I'm thinking you would be a great board member. How about it? Well, my husband said I had some questions because Bob wasn't offering him any information. So my husband asked if he could see information like this. And Bob didn't have anything with him. And Bob had to meet with him again to give him information about the nonprofit. If you're recruiting someone for your board, give them a lot of information to look at. For one thing, it's a great way to brag about how really, truly wonderful your nonprofit is and the really good work that you're doing in the community. Something like the annual report. Now, for those of you who are newer nonprofits, you may think an annual report has to be a 6-page document in 3-color high gloss paper, and that's not the case at all. Some annual reports are just a 1-pager that says, this is what we accomplished in the last year. And that's a great piece of information to give to someone you want to serve on your board. Look at us. Look what we've done in the last year. You should also give them some information about the finances. They should see the annual budget and they should see a recent financial statement. They deserve to know what they're getting into. And hopefully all of you have wonderful financial statements that show that you're doing really well. And that will give that person more confidence in serving on the board. Long-range plans, they should get a copy of your strategic plan. Let them know where you're going, where you intend to go. Let them get excited about the mission. It's also good to give them a list of current board members, where they work, who they're with. It's good for new board members to know who they're going to be serving with. And then the next thing I think is important. We sometimes don't think of this with board of directors. Board members should have job descriptions. They should know what they're expected to do. And it may be very simple in terms of attending board meetings, reading all the material, speaking up at board meetings. coming to events, serving on a committee, but whatever it is, there should be a job description that tells them what you expect of them. And then a board organization chart. If there are various committees on the board, some boards have lots of committees, some only have 2 or 3, but your prospective members should know what committees there are and should be able to ask you questions about those committees to know where they may want to serve when they join the board. And then if it's a larger nonprofit, a staff organization chart. If you're small, you may not need to have an organization chart, but certainly to talk about the staffing that you have, or if you're an all-volunteer organization, to talk about how board members fill in for program. And then newsletters, brochures, any other publications that you've had that give the prospective board member an idea of what the nonprofit is really all about. And then the bio of the chief executive. I always think when there's an interview of a prospective board member, it should be a collaborative effort between the board chair or a member of the governance committee, if the governance committee is responsible for nominating, but that member of the board and the chief executive both meet, and it should be a casual meeting. It should be a breakfast, a lunch, a coffee meeting where you can really get to know the person and how they feel about issues that are important to the nonprofit. And when you give someone a lot of information about the nonprofit, it allows them to make an informed decision. When you give them information about what's really going to be required of them, that also gives them the opportunity to make an informed decision about whether they have the time commitment. For example, a prospective board member may mean that their only obligation is to come to a meeting once a month. But if the expectation is that board members also serve on a committee that also meets once a month, if the expectation is that board members attend events, and there are 3 events every year, and board members are expected to participate in other activities, maybe even volunteer a certain number of hours every month, then a prospective board member should be given that information up front so that, again, they can make an informed decision and there are no misunderstandings that would cause them to not be a really great board member. Expectations. Again, that board member job description, and from the very beginning, they should receive a schedule of board meetings for the year. Every board member should have a year's worth of dates to put on their calendars so that there really isn't a reason for them not to attend. The time commitment should be explained. I just talked about some of the time commitments that are often not explained to prospective board members. You should make sure that board members and all board members, it's good to remind current board members of what their obligations are as well. And then if you require a financial contribution, some nonprofits require a specific financial contribution every year. Some nonprofits just ask that every board member is expected to make a contribution according to his ability to do so. I do think it's very important for every member of the board to contribute to the organization. As much or as little as it might be, it is important that there is 100% giving on a board. Funding organizations, foundations, one of the first questions they will ask is there 100% giving by the board of directors? And they don't understand when the board of directors isn't giving to the organization. So if there is a financial contribution expected, make sure that that's explained to a prospective board member so that they know if there is a specific dollar amount or if it's up to them to make a contribution that they can afford. And then finally, a board expectation agreement. I think it's important that there is a written agreement that all board members sign every year that outlines some of the things in the job description and that the board members agree to. You know, I agree that I will attend a minimum of 9 of 12 board meetings every year. I commit to making a financial contribution to the organization. One of the supplementary materials that we will have on the blog as well is a sample of a board expectation agreement. And all board members should be required to sign that agreement. There is something about signing an agreement that makes it a more serious commitment on everyone's part and also makes it very clear about what the expectations are so that board members aren't surprised that there are other things they're supposed to do that they really didn't know about. Orientation is really important. I knew someone who said that she was invited to serve on a board, was thrilled. It was a nonprofit she loved dearly. They said, that's great. The next meeting is, and they gave her the date of the next meeting. And she came to the next meeting and was handed a packet of material. She didn't get anything beforehand, was handed a packet of material, sat down at the table, was not introduced to the other board members, tried to introduce herself to the people around her, and then had no idea what was really being discussed at the board meeting because she had no idea of what decisions had gone before, and she was not, she didn't have time to look through all the material that she had been given when she walked in the door of the board meeting. So it's really important that there is an orientation. And these are some of the things that should be included in an orientation for nonprofit board membership. A tour. If it's a nonprofit that has multiple programs, a visit to a program to observe. If it's a one building nonprofit, a tour of the facility, meeting staff members, maybe observing activity that's going on. It gives them a real feel for the work of the nonprofit. And then there may be time for some presentations on important aspects of the organization. Maybe the board treasurer will make a short presentation on the current finances, and this is what we're looking at, and we just had our audit, and this is what it is, and can I answer questions for you on the financials? Are there questions you have about how to read these financials? The board manual. And the board manual should include the bylaws, and everyone who joins the board should read the bylaws. You just should. I used to do board education programs at boards. And I told one board when I was going to come back the next month for a little short program for them, I said, next month, I'm going to give you a quiz on your bylaws. And they all laughed. They thought that was really funny. When I came back the next month, I said, okay, here's the quiz on your bylaws. I want you to tell me what constitutes a quorum. A quorum is the number of members necessary to be able to pass a motion. And they all said, well, that's easy. It's half plus one. And I said, wrong, because their bylaws, the bylaws of this particular organization provided that only 1/3 of the board members had to be in attendance to call it a quorum. They were really surprised. Later, they all read their bylaws, and I understood that they also, over the summer, revised their bylaws and made some changes, including changing what a quorum is. But it's important for everyone to have a copy of those bylaws and to read them. Likewise, their board manual should include the budget. It should include a copy of the strategic plan. Board manuals can be very labor intensive. There is a trend these days to make board manuals electronic because they can be changed more easily and it doesn't involve many, many pieces of paper. And some of those board management software programs offer a place to keep things like that. But certainly a board manual can be put together very easily electronically. And then when there are revisions to the board manual, it's easy to let everyone know and to send out a revised board manual to everyone. Board minutes from previous meetings. I think this is a wonderful orientation tool for nonprofit board members. If I were joining a board and they gave me a year's worth of board minutes, I would be able to sit down and see what the discussions had been over the last year. What were some of the decisions that the board had to make? What were the kinds of things that came up at every board meeting? And that meant that when I walked into the boardroom and somebody referred to something that happened 3 months ago, because I read about it, I would have some understanding. Think about the friend of mine who came to her first board meeting and knew nothing. Think how much it would have helped her to have copies of board minutes. And it's also important to say that that's one of the obligations of a board of directors, and that is to keep good minutes that document decisions that are made. That's one of the legal requirements that they have as well. time for questions. Orientation also involves getting a lot of information, and it can make you feel like your head's going to explode. So being able to ask some questions, and in a lot of instances, I know boards now that will also have a quick meeting with new members 2 or 3 months after they've had their orientation to ask them what questions they had. What do we need to help you with that you've now discovered you really needed more information on? And giving them the opportunity to ask questions. Other boards are also providing a board mentorship program where a veteran member of the board will meet with the new board member and just have coffee and just say, do you have any questions about what you heard in orientation? This has been my experience. If you have questions, if there's something you don't understand, please just let me know and I can explain to you. And then the opportunity to get to know other members. I believe strongly that there should be some kind of social interaction between all board members, but it is especially helpful to orient new board members. If your board meetings are in the morning, have breakfast before the meeting starts so that the new board members can meet everyone and get to know everyone. If you have a meeting midday lunch, if you have a meeting in the evening dinner, give board members an opportunity to get to know one another, and that pertains to the whole board. I really believe it's much easier to disagree with someone that you have a relationship with, that you are friendly with, than it is to disagree with a stranger. I knew someone who went through orientation with a very fine, large nonprofit. Their board was big. It was almost 20 people. And he said he went through orientation with 3 other people. And he said it was a great orientation, got lots of great information, felt prepared. And he said he came to his first board meeting and he sat with those 3 people that he'd gone through his orientation with. And he said he was on that board for 4 years. And for that entire time, he sat with the same people. He never got to know anybody else on the board because there was never an opportunity to get to know anyone else. So he was sad that he didn't get to know other people. And he said, but there just didn't seem to be an opportunity to talk with one another. So providing some social interaction between board members is a great way to help them get to know each other and to help them feel more comfortable challenging each other sometimes when that's necessary, and asking questions and really participating fully. In terms of engaging board members, if you do all the things that we've talked about already here, you're going to have an engaged board. Board members that know when they're supposed to be there, first of all, that they get an agenda and materials for the meeting ahead of time so that they have the opportunity to be really prepared for that board meeting. And this is one of my favorite things, meetings that start and end on time. Board meetings should always start on the dot, and they should end when you say they're going to end. I knew one board that had several board members that tended to come in late. It really irritated all of the members of the board who were there on time. So they got into a habit. The board meeting would start exactly on time. And when a member would walk in late, they would pause and they would applaud. Well, after that happened a couple times, those board members didn't come late anymore. They realized that it was important to be there on time. And likewise, you should have a finite amount of time that your board meets. I really think board meetings shouldn't really go beyond about an hour and a half. I think after an hour and a half, people get really tired. And I think if you've got something really meaty to discuss, they may be too tired to discuss it. They may be looking at their watches. They may be eager to go home or to go back to the office. So it's important that you decide how long that board meeting is going to be in and that you construct your agenda so that that's when you're going to be able to wrap it up. Ground rules for every meeting. I think that every group that meets regularly certainly should have ground rules for how they operate. For example, a typical ground rule might be start and end on time. Another ground rule might be questions are expected and very welcome. Another ground rule might be everyone participates. One of my favorite ground rules is soft on people, hard on ideas. I think we can challenge opinions and still be respectful about it. So I think that's another really great ground rule to have. And I've said this multiple times, board members deserve meaningful work to do. What does meaningful work to do mean? It means that when they come to a board meeting, there's something to do. I knew someone who said he went to a 2.5-hour board meeting. That made me tired just to think about. And he said none of the board members had to say anything. The entire board meeting was reporting out on things. And he said they were things that they needed to know about. He said, but they could have sent me those reports by email to read. He said there wasn't really a meeting necessary. I think board members need to have work to do. And I think if you find that you don't have real work to do at a particular meeting, but you do want to have a meeting, then ask board members an interesting question. What do you think we could do differently in our programs? Is there a program we don't have that you think we could have? What have you heard recently out in the community about our nonprofit? Or what did you do this month to promote our nonprofit? What did you do? Did you talk to someone you knew? Did you make a donation? Did you volunteer? Did you go to an event? Have you done something this month that helps to make our nonprofit stronger? So find a kind of intriguing question and ask those board members a question that gets them engaged. I also think that a goal from the strategic plan should be on the agenda of every board meeting, not the whole plan, but just maybe one goal. And everyone discusses it. How are we doing on this? There's a report out on, have we achieved these outcomes? Is there something that needs to be changed about this goal? Are we really ecstatic because we're way ahead of schedule on this and things are going really, really well? So that involves the meaningful work that nonprofit boards should do. And it is important if you want to engage and retain those board members, that's what you need to do. Discussion that stays on task with the agenda. And this is another thing that falls into those other duties as assigned for the board president. The board president is tasked with following that agenda, and it also means managing that meeting. Now, occasionally, we all know in a meeting, something will come up. Someone will bring up something that isn't necessarily part of the item that's being discussed. It may be important. It may even be very interesting. But what do you do with this? Do you go off on a tangent and spend 20 minutes and extend the time of the board meeting? I suggest you use something called a parking lot. And I'll spend more time talking about the parking lot in the best practices part of the workshop videos. But specifically with a parking lot, it's a big sheet of paper posted on the wall. And when Clara brings up something that has nothing to do with an item on the agenda, but it's interesting and it certainly is important to her, you say, Clara, we've got to move on with the agenda, but may I put this on the parking lot and we'll decide what to do with it at the end of the meeting? She'll agree to that. And at the end of the meeting, you decide what needs to happen with that. Does it need to be put on the agenda for the next meeting? Is it something that a committee should be looking at? Is it something that a staff member could report on? Is it something that the board could just get a written report on? But it allows the board chair to continue to move along on the agenda so that you're discussing the things that are on the agenda and you don't get off on a rabbit trail discussing something that isn't pertinent to what you need to decide this particular time. Then the opportunity to express opinions and ask questions. I think if board meetings become really heavy on reports, there are less opportunities to express opinions and ask questions. And I think the board president can encourage that. Sometimes you have some very vocal members of the board who like to comment on everything, and other members of the board are just quiet. If you find you have a silent majority on your board, do what they call a round robin. That is to say, we haven't heard from everybody on this issue. Bob and Cindy, we've heard from you on this. Let's just go around the table. I want to hear what everyone else thinks about this. and then you pull them out a bit, and you may get some more interesting information and get some needed information out on the table, and maybe a difference of opinion. And then at the end of the meeting, there should be a summary of decisions and assignments. And this can be summarized either by the board president or maybe by the secretary who is taking minutes. These are the things that we've said we're going to do. This person is going to take responsibility for finding out about the event venue. This person is going to research this item that we said we needed more information about. But there's a summary of the decisions. And if there's been a motion to approve something, the result of the motion, if the motion passes or does not pass, and then any assignments. And that information goes in the minutes, the minutes that are sent to board members. And I'm also a proponent of sending minutes to board members as soon after the board meeting as possible, while everyone still remembers what happened. And if there are revisions that need to happen, you get those done. And finally, evaluating meetings every year. You should make plans to see how your meetings are going. Is this the right time for us to meet? If we're meeting early in the morning, are we finding some board members are saying they'd rather meet at a different time of day? Are we following the agenda? Are we not following the agenda? Are there things that we need to do differently? And I will provide some suggestions in the next video. I will provide some suggestions on how you can evaluate your board meetings very simply. In part 3, best practices for board effectiveness, we'll talk about meeting effectiveness as well as ways in which you can make best practices part of what you do. And again, there are some really helpful nonprofit resources. Good to Great in the Social Sectors by Jim Collins helps any new board member or someone who is new to the nonprofit board world exactly how to be a great board member, and helps them understand what the role of a nonprofit is in the community. And again, the Indianapolis Public Library is a wonderful source for free workshops on every aspect of nonprofit management. Boardable.com is a software platform that centralizes everything for a board of directors, but they also offer many, many free resources on their website. So you can find ebooks on a lot of topics related to nonprofit management. BoardSource is the premier resource for practical information, lots of tools, lots of specific help on how to be a great board member. And then finally, the Center on Philanthropy, the fundraising school at IU. We are lucky to have them here in our community. They provide lots of really in-depth training sessions, including, of course, fundraising, and they are the experts in the area of fundraising. Thanks for watching our video, and I hope you'll take a look at part 3 on best practices for nonprofits.